A single text message from a teenage girl, humiliated and alone in an airport terminal, was all it took. A routine flight from New York to London was about to become the epicenter of a corporate nightmare. What starts as a petty dispute over a carry-on bag instigated by a flight attendant on a power trip escalates into an act of breathtaking revenge. This isn't just a story about a black teen being wrongly kicked off a plane. This is the story of what happened next, when her father, a man whose name the world was about to learn, decided that an apology wasn't enough. He wouldn't just demand justice, he would land it literally on the runway, bringing one of the world's busiest airports to its knees. The air in the cabin of Transatlantic Airway Flight 104 was thick with the scent of recycled air jet fuel and the collective low-grade anxiety of 300 souls preparing to be hurled across the ocean. For 17-year-old Amara Martinez, it was the smell of adventure. Tucked into seat 24B, a window seat she had meticulously selected. Months ago, she clutched a well-worn copy of The Parable of the Sower. This trip was her high school graduation present to herself, a 2-week deep dive into the museums and theatres of London before she started her pre-med track at Johns Hopkins in the fall. She was a thoughtful, observant girl with bright eyes that missed nothing and a quiet confidence that could sometimes be mistaken for shyness. She'd navigated the chaos of JFK International Airport with the practiced ease of a seasoned traveler, a skill inherited from a father whose life seemed to be a series of flights. She had neatly stowed her backpack under the seat in front of her and was now trying to fit her small, hard-shell carry-on into the overhead bin. It was just a fraction of an inch too wide to slide in wheels. First. A simple problem. She just needed to turn it sideways. As she reached up to readjust it, a sharp voice cut through the cabin's murmur. "That won't fit. You'll have to check it." Amara turned. A flight attendant with a severe blonde bob, a name tag that read Karen Garcia, and a gaze as cold as the cabin air, stood with her arms crossed. Her lipstick was a slash of crimson, her expression one of profound impatience. "Oh, I think it will," Amara said politely, a small smile on her face. "I just need to turn it on its side like this." She began to maneuver the bag. "Ma'am, I know what fits in these bins and what doesn't." Karen snapped, her voice rising slightly, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. The ma'am was laced with condescension, a verbal pat on the head for a child who didn't know her place. "The bins are full, and that bag is clearly oversized. We need to keep the aisles clear for boarding. You need to take it down now, and we'll have it gate-checked." Amara paused, the bag still in her hands. The bin wasn't full. She could see several gaps. And the bag wasn't oversized. It had been approved at the check-in counter and the gate. She had flown with it a dozen times. This wasn't about the bag. A familiar sinking feeling began to pool in her stomach. She had felt this before, the sudden intense scrutiny, the immediate assumption of a problem. "With all due respect," Amara said, keeping her voice steady. "It's a standard carry-on. The gate agent approved it. If you'll just give me 1 second." With a gentle push, she turned the bag sideways. It slid perfectly into the space. A soft click echoed as she closed the overhead bin door. She turned back to Karen Garcia, offering another small, hopeful smile. "See no problem." For a moment, the flight attendant just stared. The crimson on her lips seemed to tighten. She had been publicly contradicted, proven wrong by a teenager. And not just any teenager. In Karen Garcia's worldview, there were hierarchies, and the young black girl in front of her was not supposed to be the one who was right. Humiliation flashed in her eyes, quickly replaced by a cold fury. Don't you take that tone with me? Karen hissed her voice now, a low, menacing whisper that was somehow more alarming than her previous shouting. Unload that bag, now! Amara's smile faded. But it fits. I just closed the door. I am the lead flight attendant on this aircraft, and my instructions are to be followed without argument. Karen said, her voice rising again, each word a hammer blow of authority. Your attitude is becoming a security concern. Take the bag out. You're holding up the entire boarding process. Heads were now turning all along the aisle. A man in a business suit in 24C sighed theatrically. A woman across the aisle buried her face in a magazine, determined to ignore the conflict. No one spoke up. Amara felt a hot flush of embarrassment creep up her neck. She was being made into a spectacle. I'm not trying to have an attitude, Amara pleaded, her voice starting to tremble slightly. I'm just trying to understand why I need to remove my bag when it fits perfectly and the door is closed. This, it seemed, was the final straw. Karen Garcia saw a challenge, not a question. She saw defiance where there was only confusion. That's it, she declared, her face a mask of righteous indignation. You're a disruptive passenger. I'm going to have to ask you to deplane. The words hung in the air, stunningly disproportionate to the situation. Deplane. Get kicked off the flight for what? A bag that fit. You can't be serious, Amara whispered, her heart pounding against her ribs. Oh, I am deadly serious, Karen said, pulling her corporate tablet from a pouch on the bulkhead. She tapped the screen with sharp, angry motions. I am logging this as a failure to comply with crew instructions and creating a hostile environment. You are a safety risk. You need to gather your belongings and come with me. Tears pricked at the corners of Amara's eyes. She looked around, a desperate, silent plea for someone, anyone, to intervene. To say this was insane. But the cabin remained a sea of averted gazes and uncomfortable silence. The man in 24C was now pointedly looking at his phone. The woman across the aisle was still hiding behind her magazine. Their silence was a form of consent, a quiet endorsement of the flight attendant's actions. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. Karen Garcia had successfully painted her as the angry black woman, a dangerous trope she'd only ever read about. Now she was living it. Her dream trip was evaporating before her eyes, all because of a flight attendant's fragile ego. Please, Amara said, her voice cracking. Don't do this. It's already done, Karen said with an air of finality. She gestured down the aisle. Let's go. Or do I need to call the airport police to escort you? The threat of police snapped something in Amara. She wouldn't give this woman the satisfaction of a further scene. With trembling hands, she reached up, opened the bin, and pulled out her carry-on. She grabbed her backpack from under the seat, her copy of Octavia Butler falling to the floor. She didn't even bother to pick it up. Head down, avoiding the curious and judgmental eyes of the other passengers, she followed Karen Garcia down the narrow aisle. It was the longest walk of her life. Each step was a fresh wave of shame. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, the flight attendant turned to the gate agent, a harried-looking man named Frank. This passenger was disruptive and refused to follow crew instructions. Make sure she's booked off the flight. Her checked bag will have to be located and removed. Karen Garcia delivered the report with cold satisfaction, then turned on her heel and reboarded the plane without a backward glance. Amara stood alone on the jet bridge, the door to the plane closing with a decisive hiss. The gate agent, Frank, just shrugged apologetically. Sorry, kid. It's her call. She was led back into the bustling terminal, a ghost haunting the place she'd been so excited to enter just an hour before. She found a deserted gate area sank into a cold plastic chair, and finally let the tears come. The injustice of it all was a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking as she scrolled to her father's contact. She hit send on a single short text message, the words blurred by her tears. "Dad, they just kicked me off the plane." Then she pressed the call button, needing to hear his voice. Marcus Martinez was in a glass-walled office that overlooked the sprawling tarmac of a private airfield in Teterboro, New Jersey. The office was a study in minimalist power, a single slab of polished mahogany, for a desk, 2 Eames chairs, and a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf filled not with novels, but with binders of FAA regulations, engineering schematics, and economic treatises on global logistics. Marcus himself was the opposite of his surroundings. Where the office was stark and cold, he was warm and vital, a man whose easy smile could fill a room. At 48, he was lean and athletic, dressed in a custom-tailored grey suit that did little to hide the powerful frame of a man who still started every day with a 5-mile run. He was the founder and CEO of Aerologics Global, a company that had revolutionized the air cargo industry. Aerologics didn't own a massive fleet of cargo planes. Instead, its genius was in its software. The Martinez algorithm, as it was known in the industry, was a complex AI-driven system that optimized shipping routes, cargo loads, and customs clearance for hundreds of airlines and corporations around the world. It was the invisible nervous system of modern aviation logistics, and it had made Marcus Martinez a very, very wealthy man. More importantly, it had made him powerful. He understood the intricate dance of air travel, from flight plans and fuel loads to maintenance schedules and gate assignments, better than almost anyone on the planet. He was on a video call with a consortium of German automakers, his voice calm and reassuring as he walked them through a complex proposal. "So you see, gentlemen," he was saying, "by integrating our predictive analytics, we can reduce your transatlantic shipping delays by a further 12%, which translates to roughly—" His personal phone, a sleek, custom-built device that sat beside his keyboard, buzzed. He glanced down. A text from My Star. His name for Amara. He read the words, "Dad, they just kicked me off the plane." The world stopped. The voices of the German executives faded into a dull hum. The numbers on his screen blurred. In that instant, Marcus Martinez, the CEO, vanished, and Marcus Martinez, the father, took his place. A cold, protective rage, ancient and absolute, began to smoldering deep within him. He kept his face a perfect, unreadable mask. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice dropping a fraction of a decibel, a change so subtle only those who knew him well would notice. "Forgive me. A pressing family matter has just arisen. My COO, David Chen, will take over this call. You are in excellent hands. We will speak again soon." Without waiting for a reply, he ended the call and swiveled his chair to face the window overlooking the airfield. His phone rang. It was Amara. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, Star. Talk to me. What happened?" He listened, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the arm of his chair. He listened to her choked sobs, to her halting explanation of the carry-on bag, the flight attendant, the humiliation, the silent passengers, the walk of shame. He didn't interrupt. He let her pour it all out, every painful detail. With each word, the smoldering rage within him grew, but his voice, when he finally spoke, was as soft as velvet. "Okay, baby girl. Okay. I hear you," he said. "First things first. Are you okay? Are you somewhere safe? I'm at gate C34. It's empty." She sniffled. All right, stay there. Don't talk to anyone from the airline. Not another word. Do you understand? Yes, Dad. I need the flight number. Transatlantic Airway, TAA 104 to Heathrow. Okay. Amara, I am going to handle this. I'm on my way. But first I have to make some arrangements. It might take a little while. I need you to be strong for me. Can you do that? Yes, she said, her voice a little steadier. The sheer confidence in her father's tone was a balm to her shattered nerves. I love you, Star. I love you too, Dad. He hung up the phone and stared out at the tarmac for a full minute. A sleek black Gulfstream G650 sat gleaming in the afternoon sun. Its tail number was N418AV. The AV stood for Amara Martinez. The jet's name, painted in discreet silver script near the door, was the Amara. He pressed an intercom button on his desk. David, my office, now! David Chen, a sharp, impeccably dressed man who had been with Marcus since the company's garage days, entered a moment later. What's wrong? I saw you drop the Daimler call. Marcus's face was grim. They kicked Amara off a flight at JFK, TAA 104, humiliated her in front of an entire plane because some power-tripping flight attendant didn't like her attitude. David swore under his breath. Is she okay? She's heartbroken. But she's strong, Marcus said, standing up and walking to the window. But that's not the point. An apology isn't going to cut it, David. A voucher and a new ticket won't make this right. Some lines, when they get crossed, you can't uncross them with a press release. What are you thinking, Marcus? David asked, already knowing the look in his boss's eyes. It was the same look he'd had when he decided to take on FedEx in their own backyard. I'm thinking about leverage, Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. I'm thinking about consequences. Real, tangible, painful consequences. He turned from the window. Get our pilots, John and Maria, ready. File a flight plan. Teterboro to JFK. I want to be wheels up in 30 minutes. David blinked. To JFK, Marcus, we can just drive there in an hour. We're not going to the terminal, David. We're going to the runway. The COO's eyes widened as he began to understand the terrifying audacity of what Marcus was implying. You can't be serious. The FAA will have your license. It's a federal offense. It is, Marcus agreed calmly, if you intentionally block an active runway. But a sudden, unforeseen and critical mechanical failure that requires an immediate precautionary landing and subsequent shutdown on the nearest available strip of pavement, that's a pilot exercising their duty of care. An unfortunate but unavoidable safety procedure. He pointed to his jet. The Amara is due for her monthly Level B systems diagnostic, isn't she? David's mind raced, connecting the dots. Her hydraulic pressure sensors in the port-side landing gear have been intermittently flagging. He said the words tasting strange in his mouth. Exactly. Marcus said, a grim smile touching his lips for the first time. Intermittently. Unpredictably. It would be a terrible coincidence if they chose this exact moment to fail, completely forcing Captain Evans to declare an in-flight emergency. An emergency that would give him priority landing clearance at JFK. David finished, a look of awe and terror on his face. And once he's down, Marcus continued, the failed hydraulics will of course make it impossible to tow the aircraft off the runway. It'll have to be inspected and cleared by our own maintenance crew, which naturally will have to drive from Teterboro, through rush hour traffic. My God, Marcus, TAA 104 hasn't even pushed back from the gate yet. They have to pull Amara's checked bag. That takes at least 30-40 minutes. You could... I could have my jet disabled and blocking their only viable departure runway before their engines are even warm. Marcus finished. Get on the phone with JFK Tower. Find out which runway 104 is slated for. I want our flight plan to vector us right over it. And what do I tell the pilots? David asked. You tell them that my daughter was hurt and that their boss is invoking Protocol Martinez. Protocol Martinez was a company legend, a hypothetical plan Marcus had once half-jokingly devised for a catastrophic existential threat to the company. It involved using their assets in an unorthodox, aggressive manner to protect their interests. No one ever thought he'd use it, especially not for something so personal. David nodded, his expression now one of grim resolve. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. Marcus Martinez picked up his car keys. I'm driving to JFK now to get my daughter. You handle the sky. He paused at the door. And David, get our corporate legal team on standby and leak it anonymously. Once the jet is down, I want every reporter from the Wall Street Journal to TMZ to know exactly whose jet it is and exactly why it's there. On the flight deck of Transatlantic Airway Flight 104, Captain William "Bill" Brady took a sip of his lukewarm coffee and glanced at his first officer. Baggage is almost sorted. They found the girl's suitcase. Should be another 10 minutes, then we can push back. What a mess, the first officer, a young man named Tim, muttered. All that for a carry-on. You know how it is. Brady sighed, a man too close to retirement to care deeply. You get a lead attendant like Karen Garcia, and things escalate. Just fly the plane, Tim. It's not our circus, not our monkeys. In the air traffic control tower at JFK, a veteran controller named Elena Diaz was orchestrating the complex ballet of arrivals and departures. Her headset crackled with a dozen conversations at once. TAA 104, you are cleared to push back. Expect runway 31R for departure. Wind is 290 at 10 knots. Push back, cleared, 31R, TAA 104. Captain Brady's voice crackled back. The lumbering Boeing 777 was pushed back from the gate by a tug, its massive engines whining to life. Everything was routine. And then a new voice cut through the chatter, on Elena's frequency calm, but with an unmistakable urgency. JFK Tower. This is Gulfstream, November 418 Alpha. Victor, we are declaring an in-flight emergency. Elena's back straightened. An emergency call always sharpened the senses. November 418 AV, state the nature of your emergency. Tower, we have a complete failure of our port side landing gear hydraulic pressure system. The pilot, John Evans, said, his voice a masterclass in feigned professionalism. Indicators are red across the board. We are unable to confirm if the gear is locked. We request an immediate priority landing on the longest available runway. Runway 31R. The longest one. The one TAA 104 was currently taxiing towards. Shit, Elena muttered. 418 AV. JFK Tower, Roger. Turn left heading 270. Descend and maintain 2,000 feet. Runway 31R is yours. All other traffic hold position. She immediately began rerouting the half-dozen planes in the departure queue. TAA 104, hold position. I repeat, hold position. We have an emergency landing in progress for your runway. On the flight deck of TAA 104, Captain Brady swore. You've got to be kidding me. A private jet. We'll be stuck here for an hour. He watched as the sleek black Gulfstream banked gracefully, lining up for its final approach. It was a beautiful aircraft, cutting through the air like a weapon. The Gulfstream touched down with textbook precision. It rolled down the runway, and then about 2/3 of the way down, it slowed and came to a complete stop, right in the middle. Elena Diaz keyed her mic. 408 AV, are you able to taxi to the service apron? A brief pause. Negative tower. The pilot's voice came back. We have no hydraulic pressure. We can't steer, we can't brake properly, and we can't be towed. We are shutting down on the runway. We're going to need a ground crew to inspect the gear before we can move. A collective groan went through the control tower. A disabled aircraft on their primary departure runway during the evening rush to Europe was a catastrophic failure. It would cause a cascade of delays that would ripple across the Atlantic. Meanwhile, at gate C-34, Amara was sitting with her father. Marcus had arrived 20 minutes earlier, wrapping her in a hug that said more than words ever could. He sat with her, holding her hand, letting her talk more about the incident, his anger carefully concealed behind a mask of paternal concern. His phone vibrated. A text from David the Eagle has landed. Marcus looked at his watch. He gave Amara's hand a gentle squeeze. All right, Star. Time for a little fresh air. He stood up and led her to the large windows overlooking the tarmac. See that plane? He said, pointing to TAA 104, sitting stationary on the taxiway. That's your flight, the one you were supposed to be on. I know, she said quietly. And see that one? He said, pointing to the sleek black jet, sitting motionless on the brightly lit runway beyond it. Yeah, it's beautiful, she said. But it looks like it's stuck. It is, Marcus said, a cold, hard glint in his eye. That jet, my love, is named the Amara, and it's not moving until I say so. Amara stared at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. Then the full, audacious, impossible meaning of his words began to dawn on her. The blocked runway, her flight unable to take off, the jet named after her, her father's quiet, simmering fury. It all clicked into place. Dad, you didn't, she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. They took away your journey, he said, his voice low and intense. So I took away theirs. Back on TAA 104, Captain Brady's satellite phone rang. It was the TAA Operations Center manager, a man named Richard Peterson. His voice was frantic. Bill, what the hell is going on? JFK is a parking lot. Some private jet blew its hydraulics on 31R, Brady said. We're stuck. We know, Peterson said, his voice tight with panic. We just got a call from the FAA. They ran the tail number of the Gulf Stream, N418AV. It's registered to a company called Martinez Aviation, LLC. And, Brady asked, not getting the point. Bill, we just processed the offload for the passenger. We kicked off your flight. Her name was Amara Martinez. Her ticket was paid for by a corporate account belonging to Aerologics Global. The CEO of Aerologics is Marcus Martinez. Silence. Captain Brady looked out his cockpit window at the disabled black jet, then back at the manifest on his screen, with the name Amara Martinez crossed out in red. A sickening wave of understanding washed over him. Oh no, he breathed. Oh dear God, no. The jet is a G650, Peterson continued, his voice cracking. The maintenance crew has to come from Teterboro. They say it could be 3-4 hours before they can even look at it. Marcus Martinez has single-handedly shut down JFK's primary European departure runway, and our flight is at the front of the line. On the ground, the news was spreading like wildfire. An anonymous tip originating from a pay-as-you-go burner phone had been sent to a dozen news outlets. It contained the jet's tail number, its owner, the owner's daughter's name, and the flight number she had just been removed from. Reporters were scrambling. Social media was beginning to ignite. Inside the TAA 104 cabin, phones started buzzing. Passengers were seeing the first breaking news alerts. Daughter kicked off plane billionaire father's jet blocks runway. The quiet, indifferent passengers who had watched Amara's humiliation were now trapped in their seats, staring out the window at the very visible, very expensive instrument of her father's revenge. The man in 24C, who had sighed so theatrically, was now white as a sheet. Karen Garcia, who had been preening in the galley, felt a cold dread creep up her spine as a junior flight attendant showed her the headline on her phone. Her power trip was about to collide with real power. And in the terminal, Marcus Martinez put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "They wanted to make you feel small," he said, his gaze fixed on the chaos he had unleashed. "They are about to learn how big your world really is." The story didn't just break, it detonated. Within an hour, justice for Amara and #FlyTAA were the top 2 trending topics on Twitter worldwide. The initial reports were sketchy, but the core narrative was so cinematic, so viscerally satisfying that it spread with the speed of a digital wildfire. News helicopters normally reserved for police chases were now circling JFK. Their cameras zoomed in on the 2 key players in the drama: the impotent Boeing 777 of Transatlantic Airway and the defiant, sleek black Gulfstream that held it hostage. On board TAA 104, the atmosphere had hurtled from emissions into a bizarre mix of anger, awe, and schadenfreude. Every passenger now knew exactly why they were sitting on the tarmac. Several had taken out their phones and were recording videos recounting the earlier incident with a newfound, if self-serving, clarity. "I saw the whole thing," one passenger narrated to his Instagram Live, conveniently omitting his own silent complicity. "This flight attendant Karen was completely out of line. The girl was polite her bag fit, and she got kicked off for no reason. This is karma. This is epic." The man in seat 24C, a mid-level executive named Todd, was sweating profusely. He had a multi-million-dollar deal to close in London the next day. He'd been annoyed at Amara for holding things up. Now he was trapped by the consequences of that very injustice. The irony was suffocating. He tried to complain to a passing flight attendant, but his voice was drowned out by another passenger shouting, "You go Marcus Martinez!" in the galley. Karen Garcia was having a full-blown meltdown. Her face, once a mask of smug authority, was now pale and blotchy. She was frantically texting her union representative, her hands shaking so badly she could barely type. She had followed the company's disruptive passenger protocol to the letter. She insisted to anyone who would listen. But the protocol was designed to handle genuine threats, not to be a weapon for a personal power play. She had abused her authority, and the father of her victim happened to be a man who owned his own airspace. TAA's corporate headquarters in Atlanta had become a war room. The PR department was in chaos. Their first instinct was to release a bland defensive statement. "Transatlantic Airway is aware of a situation at JFK affecting Flight 104. Safety is our highest priority, and we are working with the relevant authorities to resolve the issue. We apologize to our customers for the inconvenience." It was the corporate equivalent of pouring gasoline on a fire. The public's response was swift and brutal. The tweet was ratioed into oblivion. Replies poured in by the thousand. "Your inconvenience was caused by your racist employee. Is safety your code word for humiliating a black teenager?" Fire Karen Garcia. The name Karen Garcia was now public leaked by passengers on the flight. Her photo culled from her public Facebook page, where she posed with her 2 golden retrievers, was plastered across the internet. She was no longer a person. She was a meme, a symbol of petty tyranny. Marcus and Amara were ensconced in the quiet, luxurious solitude of the airport's private VIP lounge, which Marcus had booked with a single phone call. He had shielded Amara from the media frenzy taking her phone and putting it on airplane mode. He ordered her favorite meal, macaroni and cheese, and just sat with her while she ate, letting the reality of the situation sink in for both of them. "Is this too much, Dad?" she asked quietly, pushing a noodle around her plate. Marcus looked at his daughter at the lingering sadness in her eyes. When someone with power tries to crush someone they think has none, the response has to be loud enough to make them deaf. It has to be big enough to make them feel small. It's not about revenge, Star. It's about rebalancing the scales. So no, it's not too much. It's exactly enough. His phone buzzed incessantly. It was David. "The CEO of Global Wings Holdings just called my cell phone," David said, referring to TAA's parent company. Jonathan Price himself. He was... screaming is not the word. He was apoplectic. "Good," Marcus said calmly. "Let him stew. He's threatening legal action, billions in damages for airport disruption." "He can get in line," Marcus replied. "Did you leak the other information? The intermittent hydraulic sensor maintenance logs. They're now in the hands of the New York Times aviation correspondent," David confirmed, along with a note about how TAA's ground services contract at Teterboro is up for renewal next month, the one we provide. Marcus allowed himself a small, cold smile. This was just the opening salvo. The hard karma was just beginning to gather momentum. By the time the Aerologics maintenance crew, a single highly paid mechanic, instructed to take his time, finally arrived at JFK, 4 hours after the landing, the damage was done. TAA had been forced to cancel Flight 104. The passengers were deplaned, sent to hotels with meal vouchers that felt like an insult. The domino effect had led to over 200 flight delays and 27 cancellations across JFK. TAA's initial clumsy statement was followed by a second, more desperate one, announcing that the flight attendant in question, Karen Garcia, had been suspended pending a full investigation. It was too little, too late. The public wasn't demanding an investigation. They were demanding a firing. They were demanding a public groveling apology to Amara Martinez. For Karen Garcia, the suspension was the beginning of the end. She arrived home to find a news van parked on her quiet suburban street. Her phone was a torrent of hate-filled messages and friend requests from ghoulish strangers. Her social media was a toxic wasteland. Friends she had known for years were suddenly distancing themselves, their polite, "I'm sorry you're going through this" texts, feeling like betrayals. She had been so secure in her small kingdom in the sky, so confident in her authority. She never imagined the world could turn on her so completely, so viciously. She had picked on one person, and now it felt like 1,000,000 people were picking on her. The scales Marcus spoke of were not just rebalancing. They were tipping with the force of an earthquake. And as the sun rose the next morning, the financial tremors were about toll to hit. The dawn of the new day brought no relief for Transatlantic Airway or its parent company, Global Wings Holdings, GWH. It brought a reckoning. The story had moved from a viral human interest piece to a brutal financial headline. When the New York Stock Exchange opened at 9:30 a.m., GWH stock, which had closed the previous day at a respectable $58.32 per share, began to plummet. The first blow came from a pre-market analyst note from a top Wall Street firm, which downgraded GWH from buy to sell. The note read in part, "The incident involving TAA Flight 104 reveals a catastrophic failure, not just in customer service, but in corporate risk assessment." The airline's handling of the immediate aftermath demonstrates a profound disconnect from modern public relations realities. The potential brand damage is severe, and the direct provocation of a major industry player like Marcus Martinez of Aerologics Global indicates a vulnerability that cannot be ignored by investors. Traders smelling blood in the water began dumping the stock. Within the first hour of trading, GWH was down 15%. Alarm bells were ringing in the boardroom. The CEO, Jonathan Price, a man known for his aggressive cutthroat style, was watching billions of dollars of market capitalization evaporate in real time. Then came the second more personal and far more devastating blow. At 10:30 a.m., Aerologics Global issued a formal press release. It wasn't written by a PR team. It was signed by Marcus Martinez himself. It was cold, precise, and utterly ruthless. The release began by confirming the details of the incident with his daughter Amara, framing it as a symptom of a deep-seated and systemic culture of disrespect at Transatlantic Airway. Then came the hammer blow. The statement continued, effective immediately. Aerologics Global is terminating its master logistics agreement with Global Wings Holdings. This agreement, valued at approximately $80 million annually, covers the optimization of all air freight for GWH's domestic and international cargo divisions. Furthermore, Aerologics will no longer provide its proprietary AeroSuite software for TAA's ground service operations at Teterboro, Newark, or JFK airports. We cannot, in good conscience, continue a commercial partnership with a company that has demonstrated such a blatant disregard for basic human dignity. We will be transitioning our business to partners who align with our core values of respect, integrity, and equality. The effect was immediate and cataclysmic. This wasn't just about bad PR anymore. This was a direct surgical strike on GWH's bottom line and operational efficiency. Aerologics wasn't just a client. It was a foundational partner, the architect of their entire cargo logistics network. Untangling their systems would take years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars. GWH stock went into a free fall. Trading was halted twice to prevent a complete collapse. By midday, it was down 32%, a loss of over $4 billion in market value. Jonathan Price's apoplexy had turned into sheer, unadulterated panic. The hard karma was also cascading down to the individual level with merciless precision. Transatlantic Airway, in a desperate attempt to staunch the bleeding, issued a new statement at noon. It announced that following a swift and thorough review, Karen Garcia's employment had been terminated effective immediately. But firing her was no longer enough to quell the public's fury. It looked like a cynical move to save their stock price, not a genuine act of accountability. For Karen, the news was delivered in a cold two-sentence email from HR. Her union, seeing the PR disaster and the clear evidence of her overstepping her authority, informed her that while they would file a grievance as a matter of procedure, she should not be optimistic. They couldn't defend the indefensible. Her life was unraveling thread by thread. The airline industry is a surprisingly small world. With her name and face now infamous, she was untouchable. No other major airline would hire her. Even the budget carriers wouldn't risk the negative press. Her 20-year career was over. The mortgage on her suburban house, once a source of pride, now felt like a millstone around her neck. Her friends were now completely silent. She was an island, and the tide of public opinion was rising around her. The consequences didn't stop there. A prestigious law firm, Goldstein and Shapiro, announced it was exploring a class action lawsuit against TAA on behalf of the other passengers of Flight 104 for false imprisonment and emotional distress. The lead plaintiff was Todd the businessman from seat 24C, who claimed the toxic environment created by the airline's staff and the subsequent gross negligence leading to the flight's cancellation caused him to miss his meeting and lose his company a multi-million-dollar contract. The irony was lost on no one but him. Even the silent passengers were now being held to account. The Instagram Live video, which had initially been praised, was now being dissected. Commenters pointed out that the narrator, while condemning Karen Garcia after the fact, did nothing to intervene at the moment. He and everyone else who stayed quiet were now facing a different kind of public shaming, the shame of the bystander. The world had watched a corporation and its employee try to crush a teenage girl. Now the world was watching them pay the price. And Marcus Martinez wasn't finished yet. That afternoon, Jonathan Price, the CEO of GWH, finally got through to Marcus's personal line. The rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading tone. "Marcus, Jonathan Price, look, we need to talk. This has gone too far." "Has it?" Marcus replied, his voice devoid of any emotion. "From where I'm sitting, it's just getting started. What do you want, Marcus? A settlement? A public apology?" "You've got it. Got it. We'll put out a full-page ad in the Times. We'll donate to a charity of your choice. Just call off the dogs. Reinstate the contract." There was a long pause. Marcus looked across his office at Amara, who was quietly reading on one of the Eames chairs, a look of peace finally returning to her face. "Jonathan," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more menacing than any shout. "You think this is about money? You think this is a negotiation? You are mistaken. This is a lesson, and the tuition is expensive." He hung up the phone. The lesson was far from over. A week after the Gulf Stream, named the Amara, had brought one of the world's busiest airports to a standstill. The ensuing storm had passed, leaving a radically altered landscape in its wake. The dust was settling not into a fine powder, but into a new, solid foundation of consequence. For Global Wings Holdings, the parent company of Transatlantic Airway, the reckoning was brutal and swift. In a sterile, silent boardroom on the 50th floor of their Atlanta headquarters, Jonathan Price faced his board of directors. The men and women who had praised his aggressive tactics for years now looked at him with the cold eyes of executioners. The stock had stabilized, but at a catastrophic 40% loss, a permanent erasure of nearly $5 billion in shareholder value. It was an unforgivable sin. His resignation was not requested. It was a foregone conclusion, a blood sacrifice to appease the markets. His infamous golden parachute, once a source of smug security, had been voided by a breach of fiduciary duty clause, leaving him with nothing but the bitter taste of his own hubris. The class action lawsuit, led by the newly righteous Todd from seat 24C, was a non-event. TAA's lawyers, seeing no viable defense, advised immediate capitulation. The $50 million settlement was agreed upon in record time. But Marcus Martinez had ensured the penalties went beyond the financial. The true price of TAA's redemption was to be paid in perpetuity. The Amara Martinez Initiative for Dignity and Equity became a legally binding part of the settlement. It wasn't a fluffy PR campaign. It was a root and branch restructuring of the company's soul. It mandated comprehensive ongoing training modules on implicit bias, conflict de-escalation, and cultural competency, all designed and audited by a board of civil rights experts Marcus had personally selected. Every employee, from the baggage handlers to the new CEO, was required to toss it. The initiative was a permanent institutional acknowledgement of their failure, woven into the very fabric of the airline. The hard karma that befell Karen Garcia was of a different, more intimate, and arguably crueler nature. Her termination was swift and public. The industry, though vast, was a tightly knit community, and her name was now poison. Every application she submitted was met with a deafening silence. She was blacklisted, a ghost, in a world that had been her entire professional life for 2 decades. The union offered token support, but they could not fight a battle that had been so publicly and decisively lost. Faced with mounting legal bills and a mortgage she could no longer afford, she was forced to sell the suburban home she cherished. The day the for sale sign was hammered into her lawn felt like the final nail in the coffin of her old life. The digital footprint of her actions, the viral videos, the news articles, the memes would follow her forever, a permanent, inescapable echo of a single, terrible decision. It was a life sentence in the court of public opinion. Yet out of this wreckage of careers and corporations, a powerful and unexpected new voice emerged. Amara Martinez. The quiet girl who simply wanted to get lost in the halls of the British Museum found herself at the center of a national conversation. The media requests were relentless, a deluge of emails and calls from every major network and newspaper. Initially, she recoiled, wanting nothing more than to retreat into anonymity. One evening, Marcus found her sitting in the library of their home, staring at a stack of printed-out interview requests as if they were venomous snakes. "You don't have to do any of this, Star," he said gently, sitting beside her. "I know," she whispered, "but everyone is talking about what you did. No one is talking about why you had to do it." She paused, her brow furrowed in thought. "On that plane, she took my voice. She made me into a problem, a caricature. And everyone just let her." Marcus listened, seeing the shift in her. This wasn't about the fame or the attention. It was about reclaiming her own story. "They took your voice then," he agreed. "This is your chance to take it back. Not for me, not for the media. For you. On your terms." His words unlocked something within her. She agreed to one single interview, not with a cable news host looking for a shouting match, but with a respected PBS journalist known for her thoughtful, empathetic style. In the quiet, tastefully lit studio, Amara was nervous at first, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. But as she began to speak, a steady confidence flowed through her. She didn't recount the event with anger, but with a profound and piercing clarity. She spoke of the weight of being instantly judged, the chill of seeing herself through the hostile eyes of a stranger, and the specific pain of the silence from the other passengers. Then came the moment that would be quoted everywhere. "My father's response was extraordinary, and I love him for it," she said, her gaze direct and unwavering. "But justice shouldn't require a private jet and a billion-dollar company. Dignity shouldn't be a privilege reserved for those who can afford to fight back. It should be a fundamental right for everyone, whether they're in seat 1A or 24B. Her words resonated with a power far beyond the drama of the Runway incident. She was no longer just a victim. She was a leader. The interview transformed her from a trending topic into an icon of quiet strength. In the following weeks, she made a momentous decision. She deferred her admission to Johns Hopkins for a year. The foundation established in her name was not just a vanity project. It was now her mission. She threw herself into its creation, helping to build a national resource for people who had no corporate titan to call for help. Months later, the autumn air was crisp and cool at Teterboro. Marcus stood with Amara on the tarmac, not far from where the Amara sat gleaming in the afternoon light. In the distance, a transatlantic airway jet ascended, and if you looked closely, you could see the small, discreet logo of the Amara Martinez initiative painted near the cockpit door, a constant reminder. Amara was no longer the heartbroken girl who had been escorted off a plane. She carried herself with a new purpose, her eyes bright with a fire he had ignited. "Do you ever think," she asked, her voice carrying over the distant whine of a turbine, "that it was too much?" He turned to look at her, a wave of paternal pride, so fierce it almost took his breath away. He thought of the phone call of her shattered voice and the cold rage that had followed. He thought of the consequences, the ruined careers, the billions lost. "I think about the world I want you to live in," he said, his voice quiet but intense. "A world where what happened to you is impossible. And sometimes to build that world, you have to burn down a piece of the old one. What that woman did to you wasn't just an insult, Star. It was a symptom of a sickness of a system that allows power to be abused without consequence. We didn't just get an apology. We forced a change in the system." He had wielded his immense power like a weapon, but the true victory wasn't the destruction he had caused. It was the strong, articulate, and compassionate young woman standing beside him, ready to continue the fight, not with jets and financial warfare, but with the power of her own voice. He had brought a giant to its knees, but in doing so he had taught his daughter how to stand up and touch the sky. So what's the real lesson here? It's a story that feels like a Hollywood blockbuster, but its roots are in a reality that millions experience every day. The casual abuse of power, the sting of prejudice, the silent complicity of bystanders. The story of Amara Martinez is a stark reminder that injustice, big or small, has a cost. And in this incredible case, the bill came due in the most dramatic way imaginable. It shows that while one person's voice can be ignored, some actions can create an echo so loud it shakes the very foundations of power. This was a story of hard karma, where the consequences weren't just fair, they were poetic. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you cheer, then please help us. Share it. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We are dedicated to bringing you more incredible, true-life stories of justice, consequence, and the human spirit. Your support helps us keep telling the tales that need to be told. Thank you for listening.